Emily Carter and Ryan Bennett looked like the perfect newlyweds, in love, and ready to start their life together just 2 days after their beautiful wedding. But beneath the surface of their fairy tale beginning hid a secret that would destroy everything. When Ryan, a disciplined police officer, discovered that Emily was already pregnant before their marriage, then that the child wasn't their honeymoon, bliss turned into a nightmare. Within 48 hours, a home filled with laughter became a crime scene, and a promise of forever ended in a single gunshot. What drove a husband to turn his wedding vows into a death sentence? Emily Carter's wedding day was the kind most women dream of: white roses, golden sunlight, and a promise of forever. The small church in Ohio was filled with laughter and tears of joy as she walked down the aisle toward Ryan Bennett, the man who had once saved her from a car accident 2 years ago and later won her heart. To everyone watching, they looked like a picture-perfect couple, the gentle nurse and the disciplined police officer who shared the same values of honesty and trust. But Emily's smile hid something deeper, a secret that had followed her quietly into this day like a shadow she couldn't shake. She had found out about her pregnancy a week before the wedding. The father wasn't Ryan, it was a man named Lucas, a brief and regretful part of her past before she met Ryan. She had ended things with Lucas and sworn never to look back. When Ryan proposed, she promised herself that she would build a new life, one based on love and second chances. But fate had its own cruel way of punishing secrets. The doctor's soft voice confirming her pregnancy had frozen her world. The timing was impossible to explain without risking everything. As the ceremony began, Emily's hands trembled slightly as she held her bouquet. She could feel the weight of her secret pressing against her chest, making it hard to breathe. Ryan's eyes were calm, steady, and filled with the kind of trust that made her stomach twist with guilt. She repeated her vows, each word sounding like a lie echoing in her mind. The crowd clapped, the organ played, and Ryan kissed her gently, sealing a marriage already cracked by hidden truth. The reception was lively. Friends toasted to eternal love, her parents wept tears of happiness, and Ryan laughed in a way that made everyone adore him even more. Emily watched him, her heart aching with both love and fear. She told herself she would find the right time to tell him, perhaps after the honeymoon, when things felt more stable. She convinced herself he would understand that love would outweigh everything. But deep down, she knew Ryan's sense of morality was as rigid as the badge she wore. To him, betrayal was unforgivable. Lies, especially about purity and honesty, were stains that could never be washed away. When the night ended, and the last guests left, Ryan carried her into the hotel suite, whispering about their future and the home they'd soon build. Emily smiled and nodded, but her thoughts raced toward the secret inside her. Every heartbeat reminded her that time was running out, that truth would surface whether she wanted it or not. Lying awake next to her new husband, Emily realized she was trapped between love and fear. She had everything she ever wanted: the ring, the vows, the man who adored her. Yet, she knew all it would take was one slip, one careless moment, for everything to crumble. In the stillness of that night, she silently prayed for strength, not realizing that the truth she hid would soon lead to her own destruction. 2 days after the wedding, Emily and Ryan arrived at their cozy countryside home. The early days of marriage felt peaceful at first. They unpacked their gifts, shared breakfast in their new kitchen, and spent long hours planning their future together. To anyone watching, they seemed like the perfect newlyweds, caught in the bliss of their first days as husband and wife. But beneath the calm surface, Emily was fighting a growing sense of dread. Every passing hour reminded her of the life growing inside her, the secret she could no longer hide for much longer. Ryan, still glowing from the excitement of marriage, noticed her quietness. He assumed it was exhaustion or nerves, brushing it off with a reassuring smile. But Emily's silence wasn't from tiredness, it was from fear. She knew that soon her condition would be impossible to conceal, and the thought of losing Ryan, or worse, facing his rage terrified her. She thought of telling him gently, maybe while sitting together after dinner, but every time she tried to speak, her throat closed and her heart raced. That morning, Emily decided to visit the pharmacy. She claimed she needed vitamins for fatigue, but in reality, she wanted prenatal supplements. As she reached the counter, she prayed no one would see her. But small towns had watchful eyes, and secrets rarely stayed buried. The pharmacist recognized her, offered congratulations on her marriage, and glanced curiously at the supplements she purchased. It was only a matter of time before word spread. Later that evening, Ryan was sitting in the living room sorting through mail when he came across a receipt in her purse. He wasn't suspicious at first, but something about the items listed made him pause. His brow furrowed as he read the name of the supplements. Confusion turned into concern, concern into suspicion. When Emily came back into the room, his tone had changed. He didn't say anything, but his eyes were different, sharp, searching, cold. She felt her stomach twist as he asked where she had gone, why she seemed distant, and why she was buying those pills. Emily tried to stay calm, giving vague explanations about fatigue and weakness. But Ryan's instincts as a police officer made him notice the small tremor in her hands, the hesitance in her tone, and the fear flickering in her eyes. His mind began connecting dots she didn't want him to see. He knew the signs of guilt. He had seen them in suspects before, in people hiding the truth. That night, Ryan barely spoke. He went to bed early, lying still beside her. Emily couldn't sleep. The silence between them felt heavy and dangerous. She stared at the ceiling, realizing the walls of her life were closing in. The lie she had built her marriage on was beginning to crumble, and she could feel Ryan slipping into a darkness she couldn't control. By morning, he would start digging for answers. And when he found the truth that the child she carried wasn't his, there would be no forgiveness, only fury. Emily's heart told her to run, but love and guilt chained her to the man she had just promised forever to. Ryan woke up the next morning with a cold determination in his eyes. The doubts from the night before had hardened into a painful curiosity he could no longer ignore. While Emily made breakfast, he sat at the table pretending to read the newspaper, but his mind was far from calm. Every smile from her, every word she spoke, felt forced. He noticed the nervous way she avoided his gaze, the way her hands shook when she poured his coffee. For Ryan, these weren't coincidences. They were signs of betrayal. After breakfast, he left the house under the pretense of running errands, but he drove to the clinic instead. He wanted to confirm his suspicions before confronting her. The receptionist recognized his badge from his time as a police officer and hesitated when he asked questions. But Ryan's persistence broke her guard. Within minutes, he learned that Emily had come in for pregnancy tests and prenatal consultation weeks before the wedding. The truth hit him like a gunshot. She had known, she had lied. As Ryan sat in his car, staring blankly at the steering wheel, his thoughts grew darker. He remembered the vows, the promises of honesty, and the purity she claimed to cherish. To him, marriage was sacred, a bond built on truth. Now it felt like everything he believed in had been turned into a cruel joke. The woman he loved, the woman he protected, had built their union on deception. His breathing grew heavy, his jaw clenched, and a storm began to build inside him. Emily spent the day pacing the living room, her nerves fraying. She could feel something was wrong. Ryan had been gone for hours, and she knew what that meant. Secrets never stayed safe from him. When he finally returned, his face was unreadable, but his silence spoke louder than any words could. He went straight to his study, locking the door behind him. She could hear faint noises, drawers opening, the clatter of metal, the sound of something being placed on the desk. Her chest tightened. She knew exactly what it was, his service gun. By evening, the house was eerily quiet. Ryan emerged from the study, calm, yet terrifyingly controlled. He sat across from her at the dinner table, barely touching his food. The weight of his stare made her tremble. It wasn't the look of a man in love anymore. It was the look of someone betrayed beyond repair. She tried to speak, to explain, but he only nodded slowly, as if confirming what he already knew. When she went to bed that night, she left the light on, unable to sleep. Every creak of the floor, every whisper of the wind made her heart race. She could sense the danger growing in the air, the kind that came just before something irreversible. Ryan lay beside her, staring at the ceiling, his thoughts consumed by rage disguised as reflection. By dawn, his decision was made. He would confront her before anyone else knew, before her lie became his humiliation. But in Ryan's mind, confrontation no longer meant words, it meant justice. And justice, to him, had only one ending. The morning began in silence, the kind that feels unnatural, as if the house itself knew what was coming. Emily stood by the kitchen window, clutching a mug of coffee she could barely drink. Her stomach twisted, not from morning sickness, but from fear. Ryan had barely spoken since the night before, and every second of his silence was more terrifying than any outburst. His calmness felt wrong, controlled, distant, almost rehearsed. He moved with mechanical precision, checking his phone, his watch, his jacket, as though he was preparing for something deliberate. Emily tried to convince herself that he might forgive her if she confessed before things went too far. The guilt was eating her alive. She turned to face him, ready to tell the truth, but the look in his eyes stopped her. They were hollow, emotionless, the eyes of a man who had already made up his mind. He asked nothing, said nothing, he simply stared, and that was enough to make her step back. When he left for work, Emily sank onto the couch, trembling. She couldn't take it anymore. She called her friend Claire and asked if she could stay with her for a few days, hoping space might help things cool down. But she never got the chance to leave. As she packed her things upstairs, she heard the front door open. Ryan had returned earlier than expected. His footsteps echoed slowly up the stairs. She froze, realizing escape was no longer possible. Ryan walked into the bedroom, his face blank but his hands trembling slightly. He asked one question: if the baby was his. She couldn't lie anymore. Her silence gave him the answer he feared most. Something inside him broke at that moment, a line he could never cross back over. His mind flooded with betrayal, anger, humiliation, and heartbreak. He turned away, pacing the room like a man trapped in his own thoughts, his breathing sharp and uneven. Emily reached for him, begging for calm, but he was already too far gone. Ryan walked to the nightstand and opened the drawer. The metallic glint of his service gun caught the light. Emily froze in horror. Her mind raced for words, for reasons, for anything that could stop him. But to Ryan, everything she said was meaningless noise. The love that once filled his heart had been replaced by rage, a fire so consuming that nothing else could exist. A single gunshot shattered the silence. Neighbors later said they heard it echo across the street, followed by another sound, something heavy collapsing to the floor. Ryan stood motionless, staring at the lifeless body of the woman he once called his wife. The reality of what he had done didn't hit him immediately. His hands trembled as the gun fell from his grasp. Blood spread across the bedroom carpet, staining the room that had once symbolized love and hope. Outside, life went on as if nothing had happened. Birds chirped, cars passed, the world remained oblivious to the tragedy inside that quiet home. But within those walls, a love story had ended in horror 2 days after vows were made. A marriage had become a crime scene. The sound of the gunshot lingered in the air long after it was fired, echoing through the quiet neighborhood like a haunting memory. Ryan stood frozen, his breathing heavy, staring at the motionless body of Emily on the floor. Her eyes remained open, filled with shock, as if she couldn't believe what had just happened. For a brief moment, he felt nothing, no guilt, no pain, just an overwhelming emptiness. The house that had once been filled with laughter and dreams now felt hollow and cold. He sat down beside her, his shaking hands smeared with blood. His thoughts were scattered, bouncing between rage and regret. He remembered their wedding day, her smile, her trembling hands as she said her vows. Now those same hands lay still, lifeless, on the bedroom floor. He told himself he had done what had to be done, that justice had been served. But as the minutes passed, the truth began to sink in. There was no justice, only loss. The woman he loved, the life they could have built, had all been destroyed in one moment of uncontrollable anger. Outside, the neighbors began to notice something was wrong. The shot had been too loud, too distinct to ignore. Within minutes, a neighbor called the police. Ryan didn't try to run. He simply sat in silence, waiting. When the sirens approached, their wailing grew louder, circling the block before stopping in front of his house. Red and blue lights flashed through the window, painting the walls in an eerie glow. Officers entered cautiously, guns drawn, unaware that the killer they sought was sitting quietly beside his victim, tears streaming down his face. Ryan raised his hands without resistance. The officers ordered him to the ground, cuffing him while another checked Emily's pulse. It was too late. The paramedics arrived soon after, but there was nothing left to save. The lead detective, recognizing Ryan as a fellow officer, could only stare in disbelief. A man known for his discipline and composure had just committed an unthinkable act. At the police station, Ryan barely spoke. He confessed in a flat, emotionless tone, explaining everything from the receipt to the lie, to the confrontation that ended with the gunshot. He didn't cry, didn't argue, didn't ask for mercy. When the interrogation ended, he was placed in a holding cell, where he finally broke down. Alone in the silence, his guilt came crashing down like a wave. He realized he had destroyed more than one life he had ended too, and in doing so, lost his own. News of the murder spread quickly. Headlines across Ohio screamed the story of the police officer who shot his wife 2 days after their wedding. Reporters swarmed the quiet street, neighbors stood in disbelief, and Emily's family collapsed in grief. They had loved Ryan, trusted him, believed he would protect their daughter. Now he was the reason she was gone. As investigators pieced together the timeline, a clearer picture emerged. Emily had visited the clinic weeks before the wedding, confirming her pregnancy, and had made multiple attempts to reach out to Lucas, the man she had been involved with before meeting Ryan, but she never went through with telling Ryan, likely out of fear. Her journal, found in her dresser drawer, revealed her internal conflict, the guilt of lying, the fear of losing him, and her hope that somehow he would accept her despite everything. Those words painted her not as a schemer, but as a woman trapped by her own choices. Ryan's trial was swift. The evidence was undeniable, and his confession left no room for defense. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. During sentencing, he sat motionless, eyes fixed on the floor, as Emily's parents begged for answers he couldn't give. He had destroyed their family, and no punishment could undo that. Years later, Ryan would write a letter from prison to Emily's parents, apologizing for everything. He wrote about how anger blinded him, how betrayal turned him into something he didn't recognize. He ended the letter by admitting that he still saw her in his dreams, smiling, forgiving, haunting. The house where it all happened was eventually sold, but neighbors said no one stayed there long. Some claimed to hear soft sobs at night or the faint sound of a gun clicking. Whether true or not, the story lingered in the community as a chilling reminder of how love, when poisoned by lies and pride, could end in unimaginable tragedy. In the end, the case became known as the 2-day marriage murder, a grim tale of love, secrets, and shattered vows. It stood as a warning that even the strongest relationships can collapse under the weight of deception, and that sometimes, the truth, no matter how painful, is the only thing that can save a life.